I'm Nick, and I'm building a company, starting from scratch. And I'm talking about this right now because part of my process is going to be sharing my experience of building this business with whoever wants to watch. And no matter how much success or failure I experience, hopefully it's informative, hopefully it's entertaining to some degree, inspiring, do I dare use that word? Hopefully you get something from it, is what I'm saying. The next question I think would be, I told you my name, but really, who am I? Why do you care? I'm Nick, I'm building a company. All right. Who have I been until now? I've had 13 years of experience building products. For most of that time, my job title has been something like product designer, UX designer, UI designer, one of those things. I've also been known as a UX analyst, a user researcher, product owner. I've worn all of those hats. I've also founded my own companies before, and I've worked with every size of company, every stage in a lot of different fields. I'll name drop a few here. I've worked for ACT, the test company. I've worked for Atlassian, famous for Jira, but they have a lot of other products as well. I've worked with John Deere, the tractor company. And one of my startups was accepted into a Techstars accelerator, which just is a wealth of experience and meeting fascinating people, and just, it was an experience. As a true UX professional, user experience, I didn't just design user interface elements. I've been designing experiences, which I think is a key aspect to what I believe I can offer to people, that knowledge and expertise that I have in that area. I understand the connective tissue behind things like design and business, and how you can bring those two together and maximize the synergy that happens between them. I spent, it was probably a decade in the universities. I've collected 11 different majors, minors, and certifications at undergraduate and graduate levels. Last one I got was a master's in information science. Yeah, and so that's kind of my background. All right, so I've talked about who I am, what I'm doing in broad strokes, what I have done. Now, let's get into some more details about what this is and why it's here. And by this, right now, I mean the YouTube channel. So this channel exists, as I already said, it's a method of me documenting my business journey of creating and growing strategic design. But it's also a tool for my business in its own right. So I'm leveraging it as a growth vector to get more awareness about me, what I'm doing, services I will be offering, and just kind of like getting people's attention. But even more importantly than that, it's really an information distribution center. It's going to be one of the primary ones. Another in the near future will be my newsletter, which I'll put a link below where you can sign up for that. And it's also just kind of a content vault for me, not just for distribution on YouTube. Some things will be included in my newsletter or in different products that I offer to people as well. And then I think probably the most important one is I am using YouTube as a market identification tool. And I'll talk more about this later. But the super short version is YouTube has an amazing algorithm, and I'm starting from scratch on this channel, and I am leveraging the YouTube algorithm to find the people who I believe will be my ideal market. And now let's talk about the business. Oh, before I forget, like the video, please. What is my business? What is strategic design? What is the intent behind it? Let's start with the name. Design, I would say, is on a continuum between art and engineering, and it meets in between. It's more than just how things look. When you design something, there's also a functional aspect, not just the form that it takes. So a good example is actually an architect is a designer who's closer to that engineering end of the scale, but I would say an architect is a type of designer. So when you think of an architect, there's all sorts of blueprints and everything that they're going through, and they have to make sure also that whatever they're building doesn't just look fancy. It can actually withstand its own weight, the use of people, the test of time. So there's an engineering aspect to their design. That's why it's, more on the engineering end of things, but still I would put it in the same grand bucket as designers. And even if you think about interior designers, you're typically going to think, oh, okay, that's the person who picks that they're going to use orange and gray or pink and yellow for the colors and make things jazzy. Maybe some wild furniture with some nice little curves and stuff. But a full interior designer is more than that. They're not just thinking this is, the type of color that's going to look cool or whatever, or arranging the furniture. They're also taking into consideration how people are going to flow through a scene, where they walk. What are they doing? What's the purpose of the building? Is it a nightclub? Is it more of just a regular storefront? Is it a museum? So they're walking through and they're seeing things at a certain level because people tend to be a certain height. And wherever they're walking, you want to make sure that there's nothing impeding their movement unless you want to encourage people to stop at a certain place or not. And then you give little alcoves, etc. So when you design things, it's not just aesthetics. Building on that theme is the strategic part. Strategy is as opposed to tactics. Tactics are things that you use in a very particular and limited sense. If you take war as an analogy for business, tactics are things that you use on the battlefield in a particular battle to gain the upper hand because this happened or that happened. Tactics are kind of more reflexive and responsive. Strategy is bigger thinking, more broad thinking, thinking across battles, through campaigns. An entire war depends on strategy. Strategic design is bigger and deeper than tactical design. You have to think in systems. You have to understand that everything is connected to everything else that you're doing. And there's interactions between every process that you implement. And on top of that, there are externalities and trade-offs to everything you do within each and every system. So that's kind of breaking down the name, which implies what I am aiming for in the products and services that will come out in the future. As far as what the company is, really on a practical level, there's two stages that I have laid out. There's the late stage, which is where I am intending to end eventually. And that is really focusing on productizing people's businesses, helping people with that. And just to give a little bit of context for that, my own personal philosophy, I have 3 stacks for business. There's productizing, merchandising, and fabricating. So the fabricating, that's building whatever product or service that you're offering. There's productizing, which is turning whatever it is into a product, like especially if you're doing a service or you're doing a lot of free content or something, turning what you're already offering or adding things to what you're offering so that it can be a standalone product or set of products that there's a certain level of automation that happens and a certain level of scalability that comes along with that. And it's a packaged experience for users that you can sell rather than just selling your time every day and every week of the year. So that's fabricating, productizing. Obviously, I will focus a lot on the productizing stack. Then there's merchandising, which is sales, marketing, awareness, that funnel of how you get users and keep them in your funnel long enough until they eventually become paying customers. So my late mission is to really specialize on helping with all three of the stacks, but especially the productizing stack, and providing an edge in those areas. And as far as who would benefit most from that, that's actually one of the goals of the early stage, is for me to really fine tune my definition of what I see the market being. But for now, I'll say that hypothetically, it should be useful for any type of business, whether it's like a software as a service, super scaled business, or a content creator on YouTube, or even your local handyman or plumber in the neighborhood, real estate business, a restaurant. I think this is valuable for anyone. However, if your business plan revolves around your target market being anyone and everyone, that means it's going to stick with no one. So I'm going to have to narrow it down in the future, but that's part of the responsibility of the early stage that I'll be talking about very soon. I would say that I see my special sauce as solving a particular problem. And that problem is that most people in the world who are doing business, I don't think that they have as good of a framing of what their business is. There's a lot of lost potential that there's just so much low-hanging fruit that people could be grabbing and making their businesses so much more profitable and efficient and effective. And I think key to that is one of the issues is people have they collect a bunch of independent pieces of what maybe a good kind of business ought to be. And it's not necessarily that they're wrong about any of those pieces, but it's just a giant basket, none of it fitting or running together. But if you can turn that into a cohesive whole, then you get something that is far more than the sum of its parts. Okay, that's where I'm going to in the future. Right now, I have an early mission statement that is very simple and very straightforward. It is to help people maximize the possibilities in Tana. If you've looked around my channel, maybe you noticed the only other videos on the channel right now is a playlist called Tana Bits. So the software Tana is what I will be talking about next. All right. So Tana, if you're not familiar with Tana, I recommend going to tana.inc. That's tana.inc. That's their website. Check it out. The next question, though, is for me, why Tana? Why am I making the first stage of my business revolve around that product? It's a very good question. I have several reasons for that. So the first one is I have plans for materials in the future to deliver to people like you watching this video. I need some method of delivering these things to people. And along with a couple other software, I expect Tana to be one of those vehicles for deliverability of things to people, of products and experiences. That's one reason right there. Also, being able to kind of latch on to a bigger player in a space gives me a lot of, what's the word, safety, I guess, or comfort, because this first stage is really kind of a starter business to give my overall business some traction and good early trajectory. And there's a lot of market overlap, I believe, with the types of people who, especially while Tana is in its alpha or beta stage, like the people seeking out Tana, I think are exactly the type of people that I am going to be wanting to work with in my business as well. Also, being able to have a relatively simple and straightforward mission statement of like, help make people's Tana experience better, help them do more than is possible today, specifically in Tana, that limits the possibility space of what I can do and what I'm responsible for. And this can be a very good thing because it provides me focus and a clear path forward compared to something like my later stage version of the company, which is going to have a much wider scope in its mission. There's one more reason, and I kind of talked about this already a little bit, but I intend to create a mutualistic relationship with Tana. In nature, you see this all the time. It's everywhere. That's what these pictures are right here. You got this ant in the bottom right. It's farming aphids. A mutualistic relationship is where both species benefit. So the ant benefits because it basically milks these aphids, it farms them, it protects them. So the aphids get the benefit of protection from the ant, and the ant gets food from the aphids because the aphids basically poop sugar, which is exactly what the ants want to eat. Next up is this shark with these remora fish. And you would think that the fish would be in imminent danger of being eaten. But these two species have developed a mutualistic relationship where they both benefit. The remora fish clean the shark. They love to eat what starts accumulating on the shark. And so they get food and protection from the shark. The shark otherwise wouldn't really be able to clean itself without kind of like grinding in against rocks or something. So they both benefit. Same thing with clownfish and the coral reefs or sea anemones. They developed this ability to swim in there without getting stung. And there is an exchange of the benefits between these. I don't remember what it is. I think it's another like cleaning and safety exchange as well. But when you think about it, almost everything is in some kind of mutualistic relationship with something in nature. So it's actually not odd or unique to have such a relationship. It's odd or unique if you can't think of one. For instance, bees, moths, hummingbirds, they all pollinate flowers. If it weren't for those, then flowers wouldn't be able to reproduce. And if flowers didn't exist, bees would starve. Any animal that eats fruit of any kind and then poops the seeds out somewhere, there's a mutualistic relationship existing between whatever fruit tree or plant that they ate and that animal. So that's a lot of talking about animals and poop and eating. But the point being, there is a need in the Tana sphere right now of training, essentially, for lack of a better word, because Tana is a very powerful tool and it's getting more powerful by the day, but it's not the easiest thing to learn how to use. It took me several tries myself, actually, trying, then dropping it, then trying, then dropping it, and trying it again before I finally got into a flow with Tana myself. I love it now, and I see so much potential for it. The point being, there is a need, and I intend to fill that need. So I get something from that by helping people because they become my customers. And then Tana gets benefit because for each person that I'm successfully teaching how to use Tana, that's one more person for Tana that doesn't churn out of being a customer. They retain that person as a customer. So the better that I do, the better Tana does. The better that Tana does, the better I do. It's a reinforcing cycle, and that's what I'm looking for. There's another aspect to be considered, and that is other people trying to do the same thing in the same ecosystem. And you might think that would be a negative relationship. But even there, especially when the pie is growing, so to speak, you can even keep adding more and more slices if the pie keeps growing. That's one thing, that's one aspect to it. But also, there's the idea of cooperative competition, and this happens a lot in business. You look at any food court, it's a perfect example. Hypothetically, you would think that a restaurant wouldn't want to be next to other restaurants because they don't want the competition, but people are drawn to a restaurant area to eat, and when they come there to eat here, oh, maybe they'll eat there, eat here. If you have a restaurant that's all by itself in the middle of nowhere, there is some advantage to that, but there's also disadvantage because the only people who are going to come to you are the people who already know about you and really want to go out of their way to eat at your restaurant. So you find businesses tend to clump together like that. And even at a food court, you might assume there would be a bunch of different kinds, Mexican, Italian, Chinese, but sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 Mexican restaurants in the same food court. And sometimes that makes sense. And what you'll find is each of those Mexican restaurants are going to be specializing in a different area. One is just tacos. Another is really more kind of high-end Mexican food. And another might be specializing in kind of like a hybrid of Mexican and Texas barbecue or something. One last thing on this mutualistic relationship thing is my goal is to be the guy, the business that is pushing boundaries of what's possible in the space of, I don't want to limit it to just teaching per se, but I guess I'll use that word, in the space of teaching Tana. And so ideally, I am the avant-garde in this space. However, I don't need to be. I win either way. I think there's a lot of talented, smart, and industrious people in this area working towards the same goal. Everyone's doing it in a little different way. Now, if I end up leading the pack like my goal is, then that's great for me, obviously, because I make a name for myself in that way, But if I don't, I know that there's talented people out there who are pushing boundaries. So even if I'm not the person leading the charge, someone else will be. And that person is making Tana more accessible to people, more popular, which increases the Tana user base, which increases the awareness of Tana, which brings more people into Tana, which even if I'm just left picking up the scraps of people left over from what other people are doing, that's still growing those scraps over time. And so one way or another, as long as you have a group of people in an expanding space and they're dedicated to pushing boundaries, good things are going to happen. So that's what I'm looking forward to. All right. Now, there's another aspect. It's not just about this mutualistic relationship. And it's not just that I have like personal, professional reasons of I use it, I plan on using it as a delivery device for things. There's also the fact that it's a good product and there's different levels to it. There's the theory of it, how it's built and structured, how everything is a node, even the constituent parts of the interface. If you're able to do that, that makes it so powerful to modularize and implement various things that integrate with it seamlessly. Every aspect of Tana is fungible with other parts of Tana, which makes the possibilities practically limitless. So that's the theory of it. In practice, not only does it do task management, it does knowledge management. You can take notes. You can have calendar events. Some of these currently are stronger than others. But in practice, I've found my sweet spot for what things work, what things don't yet, but I think will. And there's use cases for, I think, pretty much anyone. But if I were just considering Tana based on what is available today, I don't think I would have picked Tana. I would have probably gone with Notion. I think so. But spoiler alert, I did not go with Notion. Why? Because I believe in the trajectory of Tana, in the future, that it's not just a possibility, it's a probability. And I've been watching the product for a long time. I've been using it as well, but like I've been watching what people say in the Tana Slack community. I've been watching what people who work at Tana say, how they communicate with people. I've been watching what feature requests people ask for and which ones they actually deliver on and in what order, and how much they hint at understanding, yes, this is a pain point, and yes, we see this, and yes, we're working on all of those things. This thing is happening, and the order in which they release things. And I say all of that. The point is, I have very high confidence that the people, whoever is making decisions about what features and aspects of the product to focus on before other features and aspects. I've been in so many of these product conversations, and I can imagine how much pressure there would be to deliver on a certain set of features, because it'll tick this box and that box, and the competitors do that and that. So if we just do that, and even if it won't be as good as it could be if we do it later, and even if it doesn't make sense for our grand strategy and it kind of gets in the way for a little bit, it'll help us with sales or pick up investment or whatever, we should just do that thing, right? No, they chose to focus on the things that lead to compound returns over time. And sometimes that leads to countless people asking for the same feature for months on end. And people who work for Tana having to say, I know, we hear you, and we plan on addressing that in the future. But not right now, because unfortunately, you can't do everything at once. There's trade-offs to every decision that you make. And the trade-offs that I see the Tana team making, I believe, tells me that they are aligned with a very bright future for the product. So I want to share this, because this is the last thing talking about Tana specifically. This is to explain, kind of visualize what I'm talking about. As you can see, I call this the Power-Usability Matrix. And a thing that you will see a lot in this series is matrices. I love matrices. I think they're so powerful as not just an explanatory device, but also a thinking device. Because there's so many times where I'll be thinking about a problem and I'll realize, oh, yeah, so there's two solutions, obviously, and it all depends on whether you have, this one aspect on or off. Okay, cool. But there's also a third. Oh, yeah. And then that's a hint to me. Whenever I have two things, same variable, on, off, or different levels, high, low, whatever, and then there's a third one, and there's this, what's distinct here? It's another variable. Okay, let me put that in screen. That just screams to me that there's something else over here. And if that's true, there's a matrix. It helps me uncover blind spots a lot. All right, back to this actual matrix though. I'll explain what it is here, and then I'll be placing products on here. This is pretty self-explanatory. How easy is a product to use? This flex power, that's not quite as obvious, but I call it flex power because it's short for flexible power. So it's both how powerful a product is and how flexible it is in how you can use it. For instance, if there's a product that only does task management, it's only going to go so high on this scale. But if something does task management and note taking and event planning, then that could rise all the way to the top if each of those are very powerful. If each of those are really weak, you can only do a little bit with each of these, then it's in the same boat as something that only has one feature or one product use and it does it really well. I hope that makes sense. So you can see that it goes from red to green. So basically, the further you move up and to the right, the better, the more powerful and the easier to use it is. That makes sense. What you end up getting though is the best products tend to be in this, what I call the golden slope. Why not here? Because everything has trade-offs. Typically, if you have something that has really high flex power, it's often not going to be the easiest to use because that much power in so many ways and configurations, it's just going to be really complex, no matter who designs it. On the other hand, the ease of use, something is super duper usable. Okay, that probably means it's relatively simple. How do you make something that's the most powerful thing existing in the market and the easiest thing to use in the market? Good luck with that. So what I'm calling here the representative field is I picked, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different products here. We've got Airtable up and to the left, very powerful, one of the least easy to use among all of these. On the other hand, we've got Trello, so intuitive to use. I love that aspect of Trello, not the most powerful. You've also got Google Docs. Yeah, really easy. One of the least powerful, really. Okay, the rest, there's Evernote, RemNote, Rowan Research, Jira, and Coda. Now, something that I want to point out is this DDZ. That is what I'm calling the deceptively dead zone. You notice a lot of clumping here. This is a really good place to be, actually, because if you make something super easy to use, and if you're focusing on just one kind of use case, it's really easy to have a saleable product. It can have mass appeal because it's so easy to use, and you're focusing on just one thing. You can really nail down the marketing and sales pitch and everything for that. On the other hand, there's definitely markets for things like Airtable. People who do not want the limitations of these things. They want the power, and they're perfectly fine with the complexity. So that's also great. It's easy to think that landing somewhere in the middle would be the perfect compromise. And as an intellectual exercise, that is totally true. When it comes to practical reality, however, medium power means you're not just focusing on one use case. You either have several use cases that you're pretty good at, or even more use cases that you're just barely meeting expectations. So that could be one problem already right there. But on top of that, it's only so usable. So you've got this flexibility and this power, but the power only goes so far. And you've got the usability, but the usability only goes so far. Okay, so you can see how it's tied with everything else, but why is it a deceptively dead zone? Well, that's because the benefits of each of those use cases and the usability, the benefits do not compound, but the drawbacks do. So you tend to end up with products that are simple if you zoom in to any particular use case or any particular customer vertical, any particular thing. But taken as a whole, if you ever need to do more than that one use case or stray from there or try to use the product as a whole, you often have a bundle of experiences that don't work together and end up in the aggregate being kind of unusable. And it's not for the benefits of being super powerful like Airtable. So I recommend to not aim for this area, actually. Now, you probably noticed I put Jira in this dead zone as well. And this is where Maybe I should have put asterisks next to Google Docs and Jira because these products do not exist on their own. Not really. They exist as part of larger ecosystems that hook into each other, especially Jira. Jira on its own technically goes deep on task management, but that's it, really. But because it integrates with other Atlassian products and a ton of plugins from third-party vendors and all sorts of things, then depending on how you set up Jira and how deep into the ecosystem you go, when you think of Jira, you may actually be thinking of a collection of things that pushes it up here or pushes it over here. But Jira on its own, I do place in the dead zone. And I think that's why you see a surprisingly large number of competitors out in the world to precisely the same use case as Jira as it stands alone, you know? And it's a similar story with the Google Docs. Moving on from there, this is where I put Notion. So it's kind of like at the midway point between Coda and Airtable on this golden slope. But it's not just on the slope, it's kind of like it's edging into the green area. Let me get rid of the DDZ. It's kind of ugly. This is like kind of Notion on its own. If you're familiar with Notion at all, you know that Notion has a very active community of people who build things using Notion. If you're building your own things in Notion, then that's super powerful and it's on this slope, you know? But if someone has built something for you in Notion, it's possible for the experience to be more here. It's hard to translate the full power of any product like that and the full capabilities into any particular product that is derived from that. So, you know, you're never going to be as powerful as the OG, but the products that people build inside Notion, using Notion, and then sell these templates or whatever you want to call them to other people, they tend to be much more user-friendly in the experience of how to use them and manipulate them than Notion itself. And so let me bring the DDZ back because I think this is a very clever thing that I don't know if Notion planned this, but it's the reality of the situation. You see how Notion has effectively positioned themselves on either side of the DDZ. I want to be clear. The golden slope and the DDZ, I didn't come up with those names or those terms or the visuals until after I placed all the products where I thought they belong, including the derivative products. Well, I say that to tell you that I was not trying to fit anyone on the slope or inside the zone or just outside. This is just how it happened to be. I think that this explains a lot of Notion's success as a product. All right, so I'll keep this up here. What about Tana? So this is where I would place Tana today. It's in the similar ballpark as Notion and Airtable, but it's not as powerful and it's not as easy to use. It just isn't. When you look at what builders are able to do with Tana today, it's not as impressive, I would say, as what people are able to do with Notion. It's less powerful than, you know, Tana Prime, and it's only a little bit easy. It's veering into this deceptive dead zone, which I think explains a lot about kind of the vibe that I get from the Tana Slack community. Even with the templates that builders provide to people, there's still issues of, I feel like I should be able to use this better. I thought I was smarter than this, you know? But where I think Tana is going, I think future Tana is going to be up here. Okay? So more powerful than anything else. I think that because of that power, that Tana, the base product, is going to struggle to be any more usable than Notion. I think that's going to be a fact for them. I could be wrong, but I do think that Tana will be able to, it's already I put it as a little bit more usable than Airtable, but it's going to be clearly more usable than Airtable in the future. Yeah, which is actually very impressive considering how I placed them at the top of the flex power. Now, what about the derivatives of Tana? Okay, what can they do? Is it going to be more like this or more like that? More like that, more like Notion. I think that this is going back to how like the theory of how Tana works, how it's built, and how you can use it. I think that that can be leveraged to such an extent that products that are derived from Tana Prime, is what I'm calling like the base Tana, are going to be, they're going to still be able to retain almost all of the power, but you'll be able to, the builders will be able to package that in such a way that it's also very easy to use. About the same ease of use, maybe even better, as things built with Notion today. Now here's the really exciting thing, and kind of a bold prediction, I guess. When something moves into a position like this, you know, it's not on the golden slope. It's not even close to the golden slope. It's way up in the upper right corner. Total green space. Green as far as the eye can see. Realistically, that only happens when a product is able to transcend its category. So this is a way of me saying that I believe that Tana has the capability to be a transcendent software tool. Okay, so a quick note here. I had a lot more planned, and I thought it wouldn't take nearly as long as it did. I haven't edited anything yet, so I have no idea. Maybe I'll cut half this stuff or more, but I don't think so. But I'm ending recording here, and I'll pick up with the next conversation next time. Let me know what you think of this format. I would like to hear thoughts. Like, subscribe, everything. Yeah, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. Cheers.